All right, guys, welcome to Pittsburgh. My name is Heidi Jacobs. You are at Whitehall Pottery. This is my small space studio. And I'm happy to be here again with the virtual craft show. Let's see, we've got Doug and Gerard in the space so far. I'll give it a few minutes and let everybody come over from Al. I hope that his project finished off well. I had to hop over here to get ready, obviously. But we'll give it a couple of minutes here. Get my bat ready here. Thank you. Who's manning that? Is that Dale? Hey, Jamie. Bowls and pots and bowls. All right, so today I'm going to be throwing what's called a double-walled vessel. And what that is basically exactly what you would assume from the description, is that we're throwing one piece, except it's got two walls. And I don't want to reveal what the ultimate look is going to be. We'll just go ahead and get started throwing here. And as I am throwing, Ben will be changing the camera angles so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening in front and overhead. So I'm going to adjust this face on camera a little bit so that you can see what's happening straight on. Whoop. There we go. And this is a little over 2 pounds of clay, so we'll just go ahead and start with this one. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Stuart. Carl. John. Fred. All right, the way that this starts is that we want to center the clay just like any other time. And I just basically threw the mound down onto the bat. Wanted to get a good section. And with this hand, I'm pushing against the clay, and this hand I'm pushing down, which is kind of forcing the clay to move center of the wheel. This used to take me a really long time. So if you're starting out doing pottery and you're like, why can't I do it fast? It's called practice. So far this year, I have fired almost 500 completed vessels. If that gives you kind of an idea of how much practice I have on the wheel. That's not even everything that I scrapped. That's just things that actually made it. All right, so we've got this centered here. And now what I'm going to do, Ben, if you can do the overhead camera here. Normally, all I would be doing is adding a center hole and then bringing the walls up. But in this case, I want to make a center hole, which I'll do right now. I'm leaving myself about a 1/4 of an inch of clay at the bottom. That will form the base. And these will not get trimmed because of the way that I have to make them. The next part is I'm going to find somewhere about 3/4 of the way to the outside, and I'm going to start forming my outer wall. I want to be careful here that I'm not throwing it off center. But we're going to go down same amount, leaving myself about a 1/4 of an inch. I've still got the wheel going pretty fast, and I'm lubricating with water as I go. And the key here is going to be the space between the outer wall and the inner wall. And you'll understand why once we get a little bit further in the process. So I'm going to equally start pulling up both walls because I don't want to have a situation where my outer wall isn't as tall as my inner wall because I need them to meet. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling the walls. So there's that one. I go up a little bit. And all I'm doing is pulling the excess clay from the bottom up into the side so that my bottom isn't too heavy. And each time I pull up, I'm compressing the rim. Hi, Pete. Hi, Chris. Now the key here is just to try and pull straight up for both the inside wall and the outside wall at first. And then we'll start forming the shape. And sorry, my allergies are getting the best of me. And if Ben, you try to talk to me, I just knocked my headset off. Oops. So again, I'm just pulling up, trying to keep my walls as uniform as possible. Trying not to throw it off center, which tends to be the difficult part, right? All right. So I don't want my walls too thick, but we're going to do some carving. So we want them to be able to support taking out material. Ben, if you want to go back to the straight on view so they can kind of see the height. So we're getting a little bit tall here. I think that's about as tall as I'm going to get for now. I don't want to make my first one fall apart. So what I want to do now is just kind of focus on narrowing the difference between this wall and this wall by pulling the outer wall closer into the inner wall and vice versa. Because ultimately what I'm going to want to do, and Ben, if you want to go back to the overhead view, I want them to touch so that I can seal them together. See how I'm getting tighter and tighter there. And eventually they'll touch and I'll pinch them together. Ooh, there we go. So now my walls are closed. And it looks like I have one vessel. But we know the secret to this vessel. And then I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the bottom. So Ben, if you want to go back to the outer view, I use a, this is called a potter's knife. It's just a wooden sharpened edge knife. It's got a round end to it, and it's nice size. I've got some different angled edges as well. This one's a more gradual adjustment, but I'm just going along the bottom, and this is called pre-trimming. I'm just going to get rid of some of that excess clay on the outer wall. And I'm going to shape it. Now all this excess clay that I'm taking off will end up in my reclaim. and I'll be able to use it again once it gets wedged. But this is the simplest way to make a double-walled vessel. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go back on the inside and kind of clear up some of that extra space there on the inside by pushing this inside wall a little closer to the outside wall. What I don't want to have happen is that they touch, because that'll make it difficult for the next step. All right. So we'll take this off the wheel for now, let it set up. So you've got that cool shape to it. And we've got a good bit of space between this part of the wall and the inside part of the wall, which will be key. So there's that one. Let's throw a little bit bigger one. And Al, you smell funny. Why do you smell funny? Hey, Red, how are you? All right, let's go with a bigger piece of clay. This is probably closer to 3 pounds, maybe a little bit more. And the reason that I'm smacking it is just to kind of get it as round as possible. It makes it less difficult on my body and helps me to center a bit faster. Some people like to prep a cone shape. And other people like to just throw a ball. My teacher showed me the ball technique, so that's what I make. And before you guys all joined, I had wedged this clay already, so there should not be any differences in the amount of water between everything else, and there shouldn't be any air pockets, which will help to get it centered faster. And Chris, the benefits of the double-walled vessel. Well, for this particular exercise, this has a specific use that I will reveal shortly. From what I understand, though, like some Crocs are made double-walled, I guess for insulation purposes, or, you know, having that air vacuum on the inside does something I'm not really sure about, but this is for decoration. Simply. So this clay is a little bit wet. I think this was reclaimed from last night, so it might be a little bit more difficult to use than the last bit. I don't usually throw a super wet clay. How are you, Fred? Oh, did you actually light it up, Al? You got some smoke in the shack. So I want to just take extra care to make sure that I'm getting this centered. That's why it's taking me a little bit longer. So I think I'm pretty well centered. I don't feel too many issues with this. All right, Ben, if you want to go to the overhead view. Again, my first step is going to be to make the inside hole. When I do this, I'm not going straight down in. I'm actually going in at an angle. This helps it to keep centered. So all that work that I just did isn't for nothing. I feel an air bubble, which means I didn't do a very good job wedging. But that's okay. I think I can get rid of it now. You can kind of see it here, right there. I've got a knife here. Just pop that piece. Go back to it. All right, now I want to make my outer edge. Again, I'm not going straight down in because I don't want to take it off center. But I am putting a fair amount of pressure on it as I'm going down in. My center is a little bit off center because of that bubble. So you're probably starting to see it go a little bit of a wave happening. That's not so big of a deal. I can salvage that eventually. I want to fix it before we try and meet the walls together. Because as I pull it up, it's going to get more exacerbated. All right. So again, just trying to evenly pull up, giving myself enough space. Oh, red. Oldest Potter's joke in the book. And no, Ben doesn't sit behind me. All right, I'm going to get rid of some of this excess water here just to kind of see what's going on in the bottom. All right. This is probably one of the more difficult techniques that you can do. I definitely am off center. Now you're starting to see like this side is getting a little more fat than this side. There's not really much I can do about that now. But once I get to the height that I want to be, I can trim some of that excess off if I'm starting to get like one side is higher and one side is lower. Right now, it's pretty much the same height. It's just the thickness is different. And that was because of that air bubble that we had earlier. I didn't get to it early enough before I started pulling up the walls. And with anything you're throwing that's a bit bigger, you have to take your time and slow the wheel down a little bit. My walls are still considerably thick, especially on the outside. So I'm going to try and pull the outside wall a bit more higher before I pull up the inside wall a little bit more. All right, there we go. And at any point, this could collapse and we never would have. I'm not so worried about wonky walls on the inside because they're not going to be visible. It just makes it harder when we want to connect the walls. All right. Now, before I try and close these in on each other, I want to remove some of the water that's in between. So I'm just going to take my sponge and go down inside. Wipe that out. And then wipe out of the bottom here. And also what I want to do, pull this inside wall up a little bit more. Now that I've done that, it is starting to be a little higher on one side. that's okay, because what we're going to do now is pull my outer wall in. Whoop, finger got a little stressed, I guess. And again, I want to take this rather slow. To avoid stressing the walls. It's much easier to do with a smaller piece. So I'm taking my inner wall and kind of bowing it out a bit. Taking my outer wall, bringing it in. If you remember last time, once they touched, it was pretty quick that we had our shape discerned. I'm having some trouble with the outer wall here. It's coming slowly but surely. All right, now we are kissing and on the same wall. This one is a little bit wonkier than the last one. Part of that is because the inside wall did get a little goofy and it's kind of thrown everything off center a little bit here, but I think we'll be okay. And I was a little too aggressive for time trying to shrink that outside wall in, so I did get a little bit of pulling, which gave it some wrinkles. All right, so I'm going to get rid of some of this excess material. Should just pop right off now. Whoop. That should have helped a little bit. Yeah. There we go. And again, I'm going to go on the inside, kind of push that inner wall out a little bit, clean up my connection points so it's not as obvious where it was connected. And then clean up my outside part. So Ben, if you don't mind changing the angle back. So in this case, I don't necessarily want it super angled in like the last one. I want to give myself some room to carve. Let's take that material away from the bottom. All right. So we've got a fun vessel here with a nice wide open, almost spittoon shape here. Let's clean up that, round that edge over so it's not too strikingly sharp. All right. The other tool that I have here, I lost it. Here it is. And this is just going to help round that out and give me shape. There we go. Okay. Let's pop this puppy off. So now you've got double wall here along this part, and then this is all one single wall. Now the goal is to let it dry enough that we can start carving. And let me show you with what I started with last night. I went ahead and threw a couple double wall vessels so that I could show you the technique. So what you want to be able to do is have a hard enough outside that you can start carving with an X-Acto knife or a surgery scalpel. And see, what you can see here is that you've got your silhouette shapes, and then you can see the inner vessel, and it's still a usable vessel. You could even make it a planter by just preliminarily like cutting your hole in the bottom or your drainage holes. So this was used, here I'll show you the technique. How do I do that so you can see it? Let's see here. Ben, if you can go back to the overhead camera. There we go. So what I was doing was I would support the inside wall, or I would just leave the bat on and put it against the table. And then take the edge of the knife and kind of trace where I was planning on cutting. So if I wanted to do an elephant, like the other ones, I just do like a rough shape. Let's have his trunk stick out. And then tusk. And come down to the leg. This way, if you feel like you need to change the shape or you need to clean something up, you haven't already like made any kind of disastrous cuts. So maybe I don't like the shape or I don't like the size. I can go back and you can take your finger and wipe it away if you don't like it. In this case, I'm okay with it. So I'm just going to make sure that the blade part of the scalpel is going in the direction that I'm going to move along. And I try to make very fluid cuts without stopping. This will save me on cleanup later. And because this is handmade, it doesn't have to be perfect. Rid yourself of that idea, especially for pottery. Clay does not lend itself well to perfection. So we've got the set of legs there. This one's not moving like the other ones are. It's just kind of hanging out, waiting for everybody else to catch up. Now, the reason that you want this to be somewhat hard, you don't want it to be exactly leather hard. You want it to be just before leather hard. Makes it easier to cut. If you did leather hard, that's fine. It's a harder time recovering from it, from the cuts and, cleanup and everything. So you're better off letting it be a little soft. And what I do instead of trying to take giant pieces out is I section off the parts that I want to take out. It makes it a little easier on the clay wall and less stressful when I'm pulling it out. And all I do is just insert the scalpel and pull the piece out. again, because these pieces are still kind of soft, I can pretty much reclaim them right away. I want that part to stay. And then pop that out. And I can take the scalpel and kind of clean up those edges. I can also take a brush, which I have somewhere, and again, clean up those edges. How are we doing on time? We've got a half hour. Cool. And then you can just take your finger and go around the edge so it's not super hard. You can, or super edged. You want to smooth that over. Add a little bit of water, come through. Just smooth that all out like that. Get rid of any of your unused lines. And now we've got an elephant carved in. So the next thing that I was doing was I was also using metal punches. They're all different shapes of metal punches, all different sizes. Let's get one without clay all through it. And again, I'm using the table as support and my bat as support. And because I've already cut the elephant, now I have somewhere to kind of put my finger in and support while I'm stamping the stamp in. And I'm using my finger to help have the blade of the stamp kind of rest against something to actually get a nice clean cut. Otherwise, you're just going to tear the clay and you're going to end up distorting your walls, and then you pop it out. And you can do that. Like I've got ovals and stars and hearts and dragonflies and flowers, and I think Sculpey makes those. You can get them, but yeah. So that's the one that I've been working on. We'll continue working on it in a second. You can also do really organic, basic carvings. So this is just trees, silhouettes of trees all along there. So this is more of a finished piece. We'll let it dry. And what I can do is I can pour some glaze on the inside to make the inside a different color so you can it stands out a bit more. Make it black or make it, bright yellow or something, and have the outside be a different color. But Yuval was sharing some of his work this last week, and I saw a piece that he did some carvings on, and then it was like a plate. So I was like, oh, I kind of want to try that and share it with the group here. So that's that technique. And so when these ones dry, of course, this one's going to be a bit smaller. Maybe I'll do butterflies or something, like butterfly shapes all the way around. Yeah. So I've got a little bit more time here. We've got about a half an hour. Why don't we throw something else? Then if you want to go back to the front view. Ben made me these bats out of masonite board. They're nice because I can leave the pieces dry on here. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Fred. Yeah, Al, all those latecomers. Oops. So I've been making these like fun, I don't know if you can see Bigfoot there, but I've been making a lot of goblets and things. All right. So let's get this going here. How about a bowl? Let's make a bowl. Bowls are pretty simple, but you can get a lot of surface area to glaze. So you can have a really cool technique in the bowl itself. And then maybe I'll throw a plate after this one. Just give you some examples of different throwing. It's hard to see Bigfoot. Yeah. So Stuart's up after me. Ben, if you want to throw up that banner. Stuart Fiorini. He's also got a lot of great talent worth sharing, and it's really fun to watch him work. I like the colors that he uses with his pieces too. It's always so fancy. Always so fancy. But if anybody has any questions, I'm spending more time watching the chat there now that I'm through the stressful part of the double-walled vessel. Those things are tough, man. Nerve-wracking. Last night was the first time I attempted it. When you're throwing a bull, you want to think about the shape overall. Do you want a wide bowl? Do you want a tall bowl? Do you want an angular bowl? Because that's going to inform how you make your shape and how you pull your walls. If I'm throwing a mixing bowl or a proper cereal bowl, then as I'm shaping the bottom and as I'm pulling my walls, I'm giving it that like real belly shape, right? I'm thinking about that as I'm pulling my walls up, as I'm shaping the whole thing. So why don't we make this one like a batter bowl? So if you're not familiar, a batter bowl has a spout on it. It's a regular bowl shape, and then we just add a spout to it. Or not like a full-fledged spout, but like a pouring spout. So you can pour your batter. It makes it easier and less sloppy, especially for pancakes. Okay. So we're just gonna pull this up like that. This one's getting a bit wide, so all I'm doing now is I'm just coming around the outside and kind of putting some pressure on the bottom as I'm pulling it up, and that'll give me higher walls, but allow me to keep that rounded bowl shape on the bottom. And if any of you are used to cooking, you know that you don't want some flimsy bowl in your kitchen when you're using a mixer or when you're using metal tools like a whisk. You want your rims to be nice and thick. You want your vessel to be very durable. So what I normally do is I throw anything that's going to be used for baking or utilitarian purposes. I throw them a little bit thicker than what I normally would do. All right, so we've got our bowl shape there. Oh, thanks, Cami. Have I ever made a teapot? Yes, I have. I usually do one a year. I hate making teapots, only because there are so many parts and pieces, and they all have to be about the same. Pancakes and cereal. They all have to be about the same dryness when you're assembling them together, or you get some trouble. And teapots are hard to sell. People don't tend to buy teapots from me. I sell more mugs and planters. So on one hand, they're a pain in the butt for me. I don't enjoy making them. And on the other hand, they're not lucrative at all, so I don't make them. I'm sure if I were like proficient at them and it was something people sought after, I would make them for, but it's not really. Not really what I enjoy. All right, so now I want to make the spout part. I'm just going to take these two fingers and maybe I'll make a wider spout and use these two fingers to kind of shape the spout. So these ones are going to be on the outside, kind of supporting that outside wall, and these two fingers are just going to be shaping the spout. And there we go. We've got our spout. I'm going to push it back up. And we've got our spouted bowl. Then if you want to go to the overhead view, that way they can see the shape. So there we go. We've got a bowl. Yeah, if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. The closer I get to 1,000, I guess. They keep making it harder. The more tools I'll have available to me. I mean, not that I make a whole lot of videos, but it's helpful. Yeah, so this is a batter bowl. What did I say that I was going to do next? Oh, a plate. Now this would be one that, like, in an hour or so, I'll cut it off the bat, flip it over, and then probably trim it. But these are really nice just to have. I've done stacking bowls like this too, where you measure out your clay and make them, like, I don't know, a couple ounces different, and then you get throwing and you can make them so that they stack inside of each other. I'm sure if you watched the Pottery Throwdown at all, you saw the stacking bowls that they did. All right, I need a different type of bat for a plate. This is a plastic bat. There we go. Gotta get the gook off. How are we doing? 15 minutes. Cool. All right, we'll just keep this angle for the plate because it's just no reason to look at it on. You won't see anything. And with plates, you want to do at least 2 pounds of clay for like a normal 12-inch plate. Most dinner plates are 12 inches. Some of them are 8 inches if they're, fancier. But salad plates are about 8 inches to maybe 6 inches, depending. Dessert plates, 4 to 6 inches. And, you don't need as much clay when you're throwing a plate that's only 4 inches. Spoon rests and those kind of things are usually 3 or 4 inches, depending on, the shape that you're going with. All right. So we're fairly centered there. And the big thing about plates is compression. Compression, 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 compression. That will keep it from cracking. Thanks, Chris. All right. So this bat is about 14 inches. And if I wanted a 12-inch plate, I'd probably want to throw it at about 12 3/4 an inch, maybe 13 inches because of shrinkage. So we've talked about that before, where clay, as it dries, will shrink. And this specific clay shrinks at about 12%. So So I can afford to get this a little bit wider. I did have a tool to help me push the clay down, but I don't make many plates. They take up a lot of room in the kiln. I do have a couple of sets that I need to make. I keep putting it off because I didn't have the tools for firing it. Now I have the tools. When you fire things in the kiln, you don't want glazed pieces touching each other. So it's very important to plan out your fires. Okay, so I think this is about as wide as I'm going to get to still have material to trim later. I didn't measure this weight wise, so I probably could have had a little bit more clay here because I'm probably at 11 inches. But I'm going to take this potter's knife again, and I'm just going to use it to help me pry up the edge, because that will be the lip of the plate. So we'll make this like a camp style plate instead of like your traditional kitchen plate. So camp style plate is just like a real quick rim that goes up along the outside. It's not gradual. There we go. And then I think I have a rubber rib in here. Thought I did. I lied to myself. I said self. There it is. I didn't lie. I told myself the truth. Thanks, Brian. Happy to share the craft for sure, especially if it gets anybody interested in it. So this red rib is great for flattening and smoothing and compressing, all of those wonderful things that I told you are important for a plate. And all I'm doing is walking my fingers along the rib just to make sure that it's nice and flat. And the other thing that I like to do on plates, which is a lot of fun and a lot of people like, is make sure that people understand that it was thrown on a potter's wheel. So we'll add our little swirl. Woohoo! Okay, so with plates, we also have to cut these off the bat. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't have the right rib at the moment to do it. But I have a chamois. So this is like a little piece of leather that's just soaked in water. And I just take it around the rim. This helps me to get a nice, rounded, smooth rim. And there we go. And if you wanted to like make it a decorative plate, you could add some things to it. But that is how a plate is thrown. A basic plate. Really, really basic. Oh, I don't have anywhere to put it. Meh. Nope, not going to work there either. Let's see. I won't be able to get out if I put it over there. Let's put it here. All right. All right, I've got 10 minutes, so let me move the camera so you can see me. Ben, if you want to adjust to the face-on view, that'd be great, and I'll talk directly to everybody. Everybody. Oh, okay, hi. Hey, anybody that didn't see me to begin with. It's good to see you. Good to see you. How do you keep the pieces consistent? Well, just like when you're turning, you can use calipers. And remember how I was talking about like the weight is important. If you are throwing and you want to be consistent, making sure that your weight down to the gram or the ounce is very important. That way you don't have too little or too much clay. Too much clay isn't that big of a deal, but too little clay is. And as you have practice, you can kind of get an idea of the thickness that you're consistently throwing. Are the bottoms always totally flat, or can you somehow make them concave? Yes, you can So when I was talking about I need to cut that piece off of the bat, I use a potter's wire. It's basically just like um, gauged guitar string wire, and you just pull it underneath the piece to cut it off the bat. And then once it sets up and dries up enough, usually when they talk about leather hard, it actually feels like leather. It's still kind of pliable, but it's it's dry enough that when you take it to a trimming tool, you can, trim those feet into the bottom, just like turning, except it's, on the wheel head. What I would do is I would take the piece off the bat, flip it upside down, let it dry so it was a consistent um, wetness, and then reattach it to the bat, like recenter it by doing tab centering, and then trim the bottom. I don't do a whole lot of trimming anymore because I do a lot of batch work production, and it's mostly mugs and planters, which, don't really need trimmed. They just keep a flat bottom. These pieces will probably just remain with a flat bottom because they'd be very difficult to trim without harming the sculptural part. I could probably, like this one, I could probably flip it upside down and trim it if I wanted to and give it a nice foot, but I probably won't, just to be honest with you. And then Chris, I'm not sure what you're saying there. 4 or 5, not 44. Oh, 44 or 5. Oh yeah. We've got, I can finish. I mean, if I were throwing for purpose, I can usually throw about 20 some pieces in an hour. And I can easily throw 100 in a day. If I had more space, I could do that. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions? I'll let you go a little early so you can take a piss break and get ready for your next, the next folks. That was Stuart Fiorini. And if you can, before you leave, go ahead and like and subscribe. I see there's currently 73 people. So if you don't mind hitting that like button, it'll help me out. It'll help the group out. And I'll be hopping on everybody else's videos shortly. And, I'm really excited to see what Franco's going to make later, too. So I'm going to eat some pizza before that, so I'm not, like, drooling the whole time. All right, Al, good job on yours. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to catch everybody else's in the reruns that I missed this morning. I heard there was an elephant that was turned by Scott, maybe. But I'll check you guys later. I'll be on with you guys watching Stuart in a few minutes. All right, take care. Bye.